Hello, my friends, and welcome to this episode of BariAftercare, the podcast. It's a secret title today for a reason. So, what I'm calling this episode is: Am I describing someone you love? Or maybe this is you. So, what I'm going to be covering today is what is this mystery topic of today, and what are the symptoms of this, whatever I'm talking about. Then we'll talk about the description. I'm going to let you know what it is and the origin of this issue and how to work on letting go of this. And trust me, this is not something you want to hang on to, but a lot of people do. Because believe it or not, like a lot of the unhealthy things we do, there is some secondary gain. Because for some reason, the things that we do, like overeat or drink too much or spend too much money, provide something for us that we don't know how to get in other ways. So, this is really not that much different. But what I want you to understand before I go into this topic is that we all have characteristics that fall into this category. And if you don't think you do as you're listening, then go ask a friend who's willing to be honest with you. Because I promise you, every single one of us has some of these characteristics, some more than others. And when it becomes a pattern or a way of life or your story, what you say about yourself, which you would not say this about yourself, but other people might say this about you, then it's a problem. So let's get on to this mystery topic for today. And I'm not sharing yet because I wanted what the topic is, because I want to share the characteristics related to the behavior, the way of thinking, and the way a person who engages in this, excuse me, often act. And I want to tell you a little story that I heard this morning. But first, keep in mind that how and what we think about influence our feelings and our behavior. I've talked about this a lot of times. If you're thinking, wow, today's going to be a great day, I'm so excited, I'm so grateful for this and this and this and this, you're at least starting your day off in a positive way. We find what we're looking for. If we're looking for good, we typically find good. Yeah, things happen that mess up our days sometimes, but there are people who wake up, oh my God, this day, this is just going to be a god awful day. And then they get a god awful day because that's what they're expecting. But it's the truth. And I've heard this in so many arenas lately. And you can look up almost any profound person and their quotes, and they're going to give you some version of if you can imagine it, you can create it. And Stephen Covey is famous for there are two creations of everything. There's the imaginary creation, and then there's the actual creation. So people had to imagine how an airplane would work before they created the actual thing. So that's how this works. What you imagine in your mind, you move toward. Your behavior moves toward that, which is why I encourage people to have the mantra, I choose health, I choose health, I choose health, because it'll flow into every aspect of your life, health in every area. So keep in mind that a lot of this issue is related to thinking. And the thinking that stems and goes along with this issue is going to affect your behavior. It's going to affect how you feel. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this isn't a positive thing. I heard a caller on The Burt Show, which is the podcast that I listen to of a morning radio show here in Atlanta. And I've listened for years and years and years, kind of like my Young and the Restless podcast. You get attached to the characters, only in this case, they're real, but they share a lot of their real lives, and a lot of callers call in. Well, this caller called in, or no, they were talking about a thing that's in social media, and it's about scheduling worry time. And apparently, I don't know if it's the millennials or the Gen Zs or whomever, they're scheduling worry time. So they set apart this time and they worry, 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 and then they get on about their day. And a caller called in and she's like, wow. She said, I try to have an attitude of gratitude. So why not schedule time for gratitude? Why not schedule time for joy? And she brought up that same concept of what we focus on, we create. Of course, we all have worries, and maybe the whole thing is just set aside a time, write it all down, and then get on about your day. But I loved what she said. If you're going to have worry time, then maybe make some gratitude time or some joy time. Just a thought. Okay, I'm going to go through some characteristics and symptoms of this thing that I'm talking about, this unnamed thing. And I want you to be as honest as you can in the moment with yourself about whether or not the things I'm going to describe here pertain to you and or people you know and maybe love. And I want to, again, remind you, this is not an indictment. This thing that I'm talking about is a protection. It's a self-preservation thing. So it's not shame on you if you engage in this. And also, as I said, we all engage in it to some extent. Let's start with the first common characteristic, belief, attitude, behavior of people who suffer with this. And I do mean suffer, and they make other people suffer too. It's self-destructive behavior. Now, if you think you haven't engaged in self-destructive behavior, then I would say your denial is running rampant. Most of us, especially if you're affiliated with the weight loss community, have engaged in self-destructive behavior. I engaged in a tremendous amount of self-behavior in my past and continue to on occasion in my life today. It's almost ubiquitous. Almost everybody engages in some sort of self-destructive behavior. But for people who have this way of life, this mentality, they engage in self-destructive behavior probably fairly commonly. And again, it's a sign of trying to cope with their feelings of powerlessness. People who struggle with this issue oftentimes feel very powerless, which is another characteristic of this issue. So people with this issue feel they have little control over their lives and circumstances. They often externalize responsibility by seeing themselves as passive recipients of negative events. And I'll break this down. I got some articles that really describe this well, and I'm going to post the links to these articles. They're really, really good. So a lot of what I'm repeating comes from these articles. And this powerlessness, this helplessness is due to feeling that they've been at the mercy of external circumstances beyond their control. So it can come across as there's nothing I can do about this. I'm helpless. I'm hopeless. Now, think about children. Children who are in a destructive environment truly are, in many ways, helpless. They can't run away from home because who's going to take care of them? They can't go out and make a living on their own because they're not old enough. Maybe they don't live in a community where there's any relatives to help them. Maybe they're too young and can't even talk to a school counselor about what's going on. So for some people, this feeling of hopelessness or powerlessness carries on into their adult lives. They feel like there's nothing I can do, and they don't feel like they have choices. And this becomes an issue when people are trying to recover from things like the disease of obesity, or recover from excessive spending, or recover from hoarding, or whatever it is, because they feel very powerless. Well, what am I supposed to do? Other people bring this food into my house. What am I supposed to do? My kids need to have crap food. What am I supposed to do? There's just nothing I can do. I don't like my job. Well, there's nothing I can do. I have to have a job. Well, yes, you do, but you still have a choice. You can leave this job and go get another one. You can get another one and then leave this job. You can leave this job and not be able to pay your bills, which isn't a very logical choice, but it is a choice. But people who suffer with this syndrome really feel powerless. And it's a way of not taking responsibility when there is responsibility to be taken. But sometimes they feel overwhelmed in their mind. And remember, This is a way to say, I don't want to deal with it. I want somebody else to fix this. Not intentionally. This is all subconscious. They're not trying to be this way to annoy people or to, you know, throw their hands up. They really believe this at the time. But this kind of attitude, this kind of mentality is not going to be helpful. So, in what areas of your life might you feel powerless? And then the question is, are you? Are you? The opposite side of that is, what can you do about it? What are the options? Because most of the time we have options. We might not like all of the options, but staying stuck in this, there's nothing I can do. It doesn't matter what I try, nothing works. It's a helplessness. And it's not healthy as an adult trying to make changes in your life. As is that first thing we talked about, the self destructive behavior. Another common characteristic, and again, we've all engaged in this. So, again, if you think you don't do this, you just talk to somebody who is around you a lot. It's negative self talk. So, negative self talk and self sabotage go hand in hand, because if I'm going to talk negatively about myself, then I'm more likely to sabotage my behavior. And I've said this 1,000 times over the 222 previous podcast episodes, that if you don't feel really good about yourself, as evidenced by the way you talk about yourself, then I know that you are going to engage in self-sabotaging behavior. Because when you don't speak well of yourself, and if you're constantly beating yourself up over the head with an imaginary hammer, you're not going to treat yourself well. It just doesn't go together. So far, things aren't looking good for us, right? And I mean all of us. Many of us engage in self destructive behavior. Many of us engage in negative self talk. But again, it's to what degree and to how often. I do these things much less frequently than I did 30 years ago. It's progress and the feeling powerless. Sometimes I will fall into that too. Not very often, because I jump right to, well, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? And take some effort, put some action behind my feelings of powerlessness. Here's another characteristic, and this is one you're likely going to say, I don't do this, because who wants to acknowledge this? People who suffer with this or live this kind of lifestyle are very good at blaming others. They attribute their problems, their misfortunes to external factors or other people, as opposed to taking responsibility for maybe their input or the choice that led to some of what's going on now. So, for example, I mean, think about people in relationships and your best friend calls you up. Are they ever saying, listen to what I did in my relationship? I really screwed things up. Now, that might happen sometimes. But most of the time it's like, can you believe she did this? Or can you believe she did this? And can you believe my mother said that? Oh my gosh, I can't believe my boss said this. I just, no matter where I go, people are always just irritating me. They're constantly criticizing me. And as I've shared with you 1,000 times, I'll call my best friend and I'll rant and rave about my husband or my kid or my whatever. And we need to vent. That's okay, as long as at the end of our vent session, we come to, what's my part? So my best friend will listen to me and she'll be right there with me. She'll be like, oh yeah, he's the worst. And oh my God, I can't believe she said that to you. And oh, yeah, they're the worst. And then at the very end, she'll say, now, what was your part? And it's a wonderful, loving conversation we have with each other, because we've been in our respective recovery programs for long enough that we know we always have a part in whatever's happening. We may have, shot a verbal dagger, or we may have responded sarcastically, or we may have done something intentional because we were angry with them, so we were acting passive aggressively. So blaming others, if that's typically your MO most of the time, without saying, but I did this and I did this, and this is how I made things worse, can become a way of life. And let me tell you something, even if you can't see it yourself, other people can see it around you. Absolutely, without a doubt, because you can see it with other people. It's like, man, they never take responsibility for themselves. They're always blaming others. And so, another characteristic here is that lack of responsibility. They avoid accountability for their actions and the consequences that follow. Okay, this is going to hurt people because I don't exercise and I gain weight. I don't follow through with my meal plan and I gain weight. I don't create a meal plan and I regain weight. I don't turn in my assignments at school. I fail out of the class. I don't show up to work on time. I get fired. I don't talk to my spouse or spend any time with them. They break up with me. So having a lack of responsibility, and then again, blaming others. These two things go hand in hand. Well, that professor wasn't very clear about when this assignment was due, even though you got a syllabus. Or other people show up late for work. Why was I the one that was picked on? Why was I the one that was made the example of? Or, well, my spouse, who'd want to spend time with them? They're always criticizing me. So, lack of responsibility, lack of accountability, blaming other people, engaging in self pity. I always am the one. I'm always the one that, you know, my family picks on. I'm always the one. And you know what? It may have been true in your childhood. You may have been the one at school who was constantly being picked on by other kids. Now you're very aware of that. And so it feels to you maybe like it's still happening. What are you doing to protect yourself? Maybe all the siblings picked on you and mom and dad did nothing to protect you. Maybe there was sexual abuse going on and the other parent did nothing to protect you, even they may have known it was going on. Of course, that person is not to blame. The child is not to blame for any of that. Of course, a child is not to blame for any kind of abuse they suffer. But sometimes we perceive that that's what's happening in our adult world when maybe it's absolutely not. So, some of this stuff, like I said, may evolve early in our lives, and then we're so accustomed to it, that's what we're looking for as adults. Or maybe we only perceive that these things are happening. For example, in the world of weight loss, people often perceive that everyone's looking at them or looking at what they're eating in the restaurant. It's likely not true, but that is the perception. And it's not going to lead anywhere good. So we have to start to learn self awareness and take feedback from other people. But we're still describing our syndrome here. Don't beat yourself up if you're tallying these things up, because, like I said, we all engage in these behaviors, these mindsets, these thoughts to some degree. Self destructive behavior, negative self talk, feeling powerlessness, blaming others, taking a lack of responsibility. The next one is seeking sympathy. So, people who have this mentality often focus on their perceived hardships. They want validation. Give me validation. Give me validation. Give me validation. I want sympathy. I need sympathy rather than seeking solutions. I shared in a recent podcast that a prior patient that I worked with many, many years ago posted on her Facebook page, give me an example of one of the most impactful things that your therapist ever said to you. And her feedback in relation to me was that I said to her one time, what are you going to do about it? So if you're seeking sympathy, like, oh, woe is me, everything is wrong in my life, everybody's always picking on me, I think I'll go throw rocks, nothing ever goes right, no matter what I do, constant complainers, make me feel better. Recognize I do everything for everybody, but nobody does anything for me. So listen to what people say. And if they're constantly criticizing other people, blaming, Somebody feed me something good about myself. Now remember, this isn't something to say, well, shame on you. It's something to say this person needs something that they didn't get, but they need to learn to get it in healthy ways. So it's not blaming or shaming. So if you find yourself going, oh crap, that's me, or it's my spouse, or it's my kid, it's about trying to get needs met, but not having the healthiest way to do it. So if you hear somebody, or if somebody tells you, it seems like you're constantly seeking affirmation or validation, there's nothing wrong. We all need that. But if it's like 25 people dump their love and wonderfulness into you, and 5 minutes later you're asking for reaffirmation or affirmation or reassurance again, it's fallen out the bottom because you're not doing anything to bolster that yourself or give yourself some of what you need. And this can be constantly complaining, constant setbacks. No matter what I do, nothing works. No matter how hard I try, people try to get in my way, or no matter what things I do for other people, nobody ever does anything for me. And no matter how hard I work on this relationship, they just don't give anything back. And, you know, other people feel like you got to agree, that if you're just hearing their story, it's like, wow, this person has been heaped with injustice, because if I don't agree with them, they're going to dump me into their category and they're going to blame me. And so a lot of times we have somebody who's living in this mentality connected to a person who's an enabler, who constantly, whatever you need, honey, whatever you need to try to keep the peace, or I want to make you happy. So we got a really unhealthy relationship brewing there. So we've got the seeking sympathy. Don't you feel sorry for me? Oh, yes, honey, it's terrible. Probably they're thinking, well, get up off your butt and go for a walk, and then maybe you'll work on this weight regain. Inside they're probably thinking something differently than they're saying, so you don't let loose on them, because that's what happens sometimes. This type of person is often very, very pessimistic. It's just too big. Why bother? Why even try? Nothing changes. Nobody changes. Nobody's going to help me. Nobody's going to, nobody's going to change. Nobody's going to help me like I help them. Very, very negative outlook on life, expecting negative outcomes, well, if I do that, you know what's going to happen? It's just going to rain. Or if I try to help them, they're just going to, they're just going to take it for granted and take advantage of me. Hard to be around this, right? Complaining, resentment. Oh my gosh. They resent people. It's like, oh, they just hurt me, 35 years ago, and I can't get over it. Well, what are you doing to work on that, right? Or avoidance of solutions. So you may offer solutions. Well, that won't work, and this is why. There's that pessimism. It's kind of like the boss who says to the employees, don't come to me with a problem if you don't come to me with a solution, which I love. Because as adults, if we see a problem, it's okay to recognize the problem. But what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You're going to wallow in your misery? Are you going to swim in your sadness? Are you going to drown in your helplessness? Or are you going to seek action, take action? Again, this isn't judging. It's recognizing that people who do this regularly, who live with this mentality, are hurting. They are hurting for certain. And here's another characteristic: they become extremely defensive when they're confronted with the challenge. Well, it seems to me this is going on in your life. And it also seems to me that if you would, you know, put on your shoes and take a walk, or try some yoga, or maybe get in the pool and just walk around. You don't know. How would you know? That isn't going to help me. Why are you judging me? They get very, very defensive with suggestions. Or if you say, you know what? Seems to me maybe the way you're thinking about that is a little skewed. Don't be telling me that. You're picking on me just like everybody else. And a lot of people will back off from them, resulting in a lot of loneliness, a lot of not long-term friendships, a lot of people leaving their orbit and wondering why and saying, why is everybody always leaving me? Why can't I make friends? What's wrong with me? Why don't people like me? You have to overcome and look at what this is about and be willing to accept that this behavior sometimes drives people away. And not only that, sometimes these people also struggle to empathize with the perspectives of other people, because when you're coming from this kind of mentality, this place, this negative place of looking at the world as out to get you or not helping you or nothing works for you, and you know it's difficult, and why bother, and nothing works anyway, and everybody's picking on me, and nobody tries to help me, and I try to do everything for everybody. That whole mentality, it's very self-absorbed, and you don't see it that way. Other people see it that way. It's like it's all about me. I don't care about how this is affecting you. I want you to listen to me and hear how it's affecting me. So we're not willing to listen to the other person's side of the story, because this is all about me. And it's a big sign that this person is suffering very, very much. And sometimes, it hurts relationships. It absolutely disrupts relationships, personal, professional relationships, and it perpetuates the cycle because friends leave. Coworkers don't stick around and hang around with you and invite you to lunch. The boss may fire you or send you to a different department. And so now I'm rejected. See, no matter what I do, I'm always the one left out. I'm always the one pushed away. And it ends up feeling very isolating and very lonely. And that too is seen as, it's just unfair. It's just unfair. And part of the problem with this thing is it can be used as manipulation, right? As a tactic to get an advantage over other people. I've shared with you that so many times in the past, my anger was a manipulation. Not that I intended it to be that, but that's what I knew. That's how I knew to protect myself until I became aware through therapy that that's how I pushed people away. I would get angry and mean and loud and use my words as a weapon, and people would stay away from me. But then I would be like, but I'm so lonely. Why don't people like me? Because I was being nasty. I didn't see it as that. I just knew subconsciously that I was protecting myself. So I'm going to reiterate this many times throughout this episode, that if I'm describing you or someone you love, see this as a need for help, an absolute cry for help. The problem is it's really hard to reach these people because of the defensiveness, because of the tendency to blame others, because of the lack of willingness to take responsibility. And it's really, really difficult. And that's why people give up and often leave. So it's tough, tough, tough thing to deal with, because these people resist change. They resist change because somehow, some way, they're getting something out of this. I don't have to put forth a lot of effort. I can stay the one who's always suffering. And that, although it's miserable, is more comfortable and easy than going out and making changes or looking in the mirror and say, you know what, I am defensive. You know what, I do blame other people. You know what, I do see the world is out to get me. That's a hard thing to do. So maybe it's easier just to stay the victim. And that's the topic, the victim mentality. Now, we've all experienced people who have been the victim. We ourselves, in some ways, shapes, and forms have played victim. I'll give you an example of myself recently. So there are times in my adult life, recent adult life, where I feel like my kids, who are in their late 30s, early 40s, excuse me, are so busy and caught up in their lives, as they should be. They all have children, jobs, friends, spouses, that they don't have time for mama. And there are times when I fall into the victim role about that. Oh, they just don't want to spend any time with me. They take vacations with their friends, but they don't spend time with me. I do fall into that sometimes. And then I'll say, all right, get off your butt, Connie, and invite them to lunch. Quit whining and invite them over. Quit whining and let them know. I'd like you all to come over. And I'd like to spend some time chatting with you guys and hearing about your lives, what's been going on. So rather than sitting going, they don't have time for me, which I do at times, I do. I play the victim. Why don't they, I don't know, whatever it is. Oh, I'll give you another one. So my TLC episodes, I'm like, none of my kids is watching my TLC episodes, but I listen to all of their podcasts. Victim, victim, victim. That's me, right? And then I have to get over myself and say, if you want them to listen or watch it, tell them to, ask them to, right? Ugh. So we all fall into this. Some people more than others live much of their lives in this way. That's not who we want to be. So we want to find ways to understand this. If you have somebody in your life who seems to be living this way, we want to try to better understand this and maybe help them if we can. Because this attitude, this victim mentality, comes from somewhere. And usually it's because these people have suffered in the past. They probably were victims at some point in their life, usually childhood. So they have this idea that bad things are going to continue to happen to me, and why bother? Because maybe they were helpless or hopeless as a child and they feel that way in the present. A lot of times, people who present as a victim or play out this victim mentality will ruminate. They'll think a lot about past victimization. When I was a child, my mom criticized me, or I can never live up to my dad's expectations, or my grandma constantly compared me to my sister, and I was never as good as I was the stepchild, so I was never included. Those things may have been true, and those things are tough on a child. But maintaining that mentality as an adult is not going to work. It's not going to get you anywhere good in life. In fact, it's going to leave you lonely and isolated. So remember, if you or other people are kind of caught up in this victim mentality more of the time than not, then it's a sign that they're in pain. They're really, really, really suffering. But this is an indication of pretty poor mental health. Like I said, we all fall into this at times, but most of us don't live there. And yet we know people who seem to live there and seem to thrive by being a victim. And it's an indication of not the best mental health. And so a lot of times they're in unhealthy relationships too, because you may or may not remember me saying this. I don't think I say it that often, but marriage and family therapists will tell you that we partner up with people who are at about the same level of emotional wellness that we are. Boy, is that hard for people to hear. Because a lot of times, I'll just use my own situation. In my marriage, back in the day when we first got into therapy, I looked like the problem person. My husband, in comparison, looked like a saint. And that was one of the ways I would goad him. I would say, "Oh, Saint Steve," because I was being a victim, right? "Oh, everybody, poor Steve, poor Steve. How can he put up with her? You're a saint." Very victimy of me. The truth was, while I had a lot of issues, I was active in addiction, my communication sucked, I had very poor coping skills, I didn't know how to communicate, I didn't know how to be a healthy partner, I didn't really know how to be a very healthy parent. So did his. They just looked different. So people looking at us would look at me and go, "Oh God, she's so angry and she's so, she's so controlling and she's so critical and she's so." On the other hand, he was the yin to the yang, right? He would not say anything. He didn't stand up for himself. He didn't put boundaries. "I'm not listening to you talk to me that way." He was the codependent. So victim mentality people often forge codependent relationships with people who maybe they want to rescue them. Steve was a rescuer. He wanted to be seen as the good guy. Now, I'm not saying anything he wouldn't admit to. We've worked all this out in therapy a long time ago and have learned the skills to not play those roles. But, the rescuer, the codependent, will constant validation. "Oh, it's okay. Or they'll go get you your food, or they'll go get you your cigarettes, or they'll go get, because they want to be the good guy and they want to be seen as the good guy and they want to be your support at a lot of cost to themselves and to the relationship. So neither one of those roles is real healthy. Both of them are acting out unhealthy mental health needs. One needs to be liked and appreciated and validated for reasons different than feeling like a victim. They just don't feel that good about themselves. The other one is a victim, and this person's going to rescue them and do everything for them. Not a healthy combo, and that's how it is a lot. So, a person who has a victim mentality, let me repeat it again. I don't mean acting out one or two of these behaviors now and then. I mean living, swimming in this cocktail. Operates according to what is referred to as an external locus of control, meaning I don't have any personal agency. I don't have any efficacy. I don't believe I can do these things on a consistent basis. Yeah, maybe I can get out there and do the gotta do's for a week or two or 3 months. Maybe I can get out there and set some boundaries for myself for a little while. People who live in this victim mentality, not engage in some of these behaviors now and then, but overall are just so unhappy and see themselves as being picked on and see the world as being against them and see themselves as no matter what I do, nothing helps. And no matter how much I give, I get nothing, all of this stuff. They operate on what's called an external locus of control, meaning they don't believe that they have very much agency or ability to do for themselves or self efficacy. And they may say for a while, "I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do these gotta do's and I'm going to put into action these steps to overcome my thing." But it doesn't last because before long, they're back in the poor, poor, pitiful me. And most people just look at it and go, "I don't want to be anywhere near that." It's a sign of, I want to say, desperation and a really unhealthy place. I've been there, maybe you've been there, and certainly we've probably known people who are about there, and they fall back into it's other people's fault. Nobody, very few people have it as bad as me. There's too many challenges. These other people, these other situations, nothing works no matter what. A victim mentality, remember, it's very, very brittle. It's a very painful state of mind. It can also be, like I said, it can also be used as manipulation. Not intentionally. I don't think people who do this do it intentionally to any degree. But the only way to get out of this is through it. That means being willing to look at it. But before we get into how do I get out of this, how do I overcome this victim complex, this victim mentality, let's look at some of the ways this is going to hurt you. So if you adopt this victim mentality, it has serious impacts on your mental health and your overall well-being because you feel depressed. You push people away. You feel hopeless. And it's like swimming in a vortex of a whirlpool that threatens to take you under. And it's going to destroy relationships. You're going to push people away. People aren't going to want to be around you because who wants to be around that? And then you're going to feel sorrier for yourself. So this, if you refer to somebody as, my God, they feel so sorry for themselves, or if somebody says, do you quit feeling sorry for yourself? Same thing as kind of saying you're a victim. If you're a control freak, a lot of times you have this victim mentality. And I'll share something else real personal with you that lets you know that I am not talking about other people in a way that doesn't describe me at different times in my life. But before I went into treatment, I was very unaware of my coping mechanisms, some of which were victim-y, some of which were bullying, some were abusive verbally. That's how I protected myself. Unhealthy coping skills run rampant, not helping me and certainly not helping anybody else. Not good for my relationships, not good for me as a mother, not good for my mental health. So the addictions come in and I drink and I use food and I do all these escapism things because I don't even like me. I don't want to be around me and nobody else did either, really. So you destroy, you're self-destructing. You're just self-destructing. So I went into treatment and I'm not there long, maybe a week or two. And how it was then was we would start in what was called community groups. There were probably 40 people in the community group. And in the community group, there were like 3 or 4 counselors, and the rest of us were the patients. And then we would have a community group, and after that, we would split up into different small groups. And in the community group, they would give us different kinds of homework to help us learn to recognize our unhealthy behaviors. And then every once in a while, we would have individual sessions with the therapists. So one of the assignments they continued to give me, like night after night after night after night. And I was getting really frustrated with this assignment because clearly I wasn't getting the message. But the assignment was to make a list of ways I attempted to control other people. Didn't understand it at all at the time, but I listened to other people's lists and I tried to follow what they were saying, and I just didn't get it. But what they were trying to help me with, I learned during an individual session with the therapist, who said to me, "Gee, Connie, it just sounds to me like nobody's behaving." And hallelujah, I was like, somebody finally understands. See how hard it's been to be in my life? Nobody is behaving. And what he was telling me was not, he was not cozying up to me and saying, I get it. What he was saying is, you are a freaking control freak. And you're not understanding the ways you try to control other people. And when he said nobody's controlling, what he was saying is, people aren't doing what you want them to do when you want them to do it the way you want them to do it. They're not saying what you want them to say the way you want them to say it, when you want them to say it. People are not behaving according to your rules, your guidelines, and you're all pissed off about it. And you're blaming them for your misery, and it's really your own doing. Oh my God. When that hit me and when that sunk in, I was mortified. I was mortified But I'll tell you what I didn't do. I didn't get defensive. I didn't say, well, you're doing it to me too. You don't understand. I got it. And then my list of controlling behaviors sounded something like this. I attempted to control my husband by my yelling at him. In other words, I wanted him to do something for me. And I knew if I got angry and mad enough, he would do it for me. Let's put this into what I've heard from a lot of patients that I've worked with and their partners. So the partner says, I want to be supportive. I don't want to go out and get them unhealthy food. But if I don't, they lose it on me. And then the person who has the food issue will say, very embarrassed, that's true. I'll ask them to, first of all, they say, please don't give in to my requests for unhealthy food. I don't want you to say yes to me. But then they get a craving or they get really upset about something and they want their XYZ form of food to comfort them. And so they'll say to the codependent spouse who used to go get their thing for them to make them feel better. And then they're the hero. Oh, you're my hero. You went and got this, and now I feel better. So we've got unhealthy meeting unhealthy there, which was me and Steve. And then if the partner says, no, you asked me not to go get you the cigarettes, the alcohol, the chocolate cake, the ice cream, the whatever it is. And then you're like, I don't care what I said. I want it. Listen, I'm not going to do that for you because I'm not going to participate in you harming yourself, your self-destructive behavior. Yes, you are. Are you going to go get it? So some people yell and holler and scream. Some people are like, fine, no sex for you for 7 years. We use it as a weapon. And so then our codependent person gives in because they don't want to be yelled at. They don't want to have no sex for 7 years. They don't want to, whatever it happens to be. So again, we've got unhealthy and unhealthy. But this is how these things play out. So again, back to my list of controlling and victim mentality, like why don't people do what I want? Why can't they just cooperate? That was the victim. And then the control stuff was I would yell at Steve and then he would do what I wanted him to do. Or I would be manipulative with, well, this is victimization too. You're talking to me just like my dad did. I didn't really use that, but that's an example. Or another controlling thing people will say, I turned on the tears so they would feel sorry for me and quit yelling at me. Or um, I took the kids and left because I knew they had a fear that I was going to leave them. And so I did it as a get even. Those are all controlling behaviors. When we do something with the intention of having somebody else comply the way we want them to, that is a controlling behavior. And there are 1,000 subtle examples of that you're not aware that you do, that I had no idea that I was doing. So you can control with your voice tone. You can control people with a look. You can control people with withholding. You can control people by not engaging with them in conversation or not going places with. We attempt to control people in 1,000 different ways. And a lot of it is through communication, verbal or nonverbal. And that's how we get our way. Those are attempts to control. And a lot of it goes hand in hand with feeling like a victim. So the victim mentality is absolute form of further self-destruction. And a lot of times people get very morally superior. They're like, I'm not doing anything wrong. They're the one. Go to divorce court. Anybody in divorce court going, yeah, well, this divorce is pretty much my fault. No, people are like, well, they this and they that and they this. When you listen to somebody talk, people who are dating, tell me about your last relationship. Well, they were just crazy, or they were really just mean, and they were really manipulative, or they were really nothing about. It takes two friends. Every issue has two people participating in it. And if you were part of the relationship, you were the other person. But you're not going into the new relationship saying, well, I was pretty controlling in that relationship, or, you know, I was a little bit manipulative, or, wow, I can really turn on the tears when I want to. No, we talk about what the other person did wrong and how they were a psycho bee and how they were controlling and how they were. Some of that may be true, but you had a part too. So just saying. So the dangers of victimhood, staying childlike in your thinking, because children who are victims, and I'm not saying adults aren't victims at times too. If you're a victim of a rape, or if you're the victim of a hostage situation, or you're the victim of a shooting, a drive-by, adults are victims in situations too. I'm not saying they're not. And bad things do happen. And there are times when somebody truly is a victim. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this mentality that the whole world is out to get me and picking on me, and nothing I do is good enough. And I do everything for everybody else, and nobody does what I do for them. And it's hard to be around. It's very, very difficult to be around. So how do we let go of this? If you're the person who acts like the victim, you better get yourself into therapy, because you're not going to recognize these things yourself. You may have, there's a saying, if 10 people tell you you have a tail, you might want to turn around and take a look. So if you've had relationship after relationship, friendship after friendship, or people in your family and at work and at home and in your church group or wherever, if you get the same kind of message that, gosh, you really complain a lot, or wow, nothing ever seems good enough for you, or you tend to be kind of a little bit controlling, or gosh, it hurts me to see you be so negative, or people bring suggestions to you, you get really defensive, you get quite defensive. If you've heard these messages from different sources, you need help. But until you recognize that you need help, you're probably not going to get help. So it's difficult to help somebody who's in a victim mentality, because they don't want to look at it. First of all, who wants to acknowledge those things about yourself? Second of all, it's serving you a purpose. It's getting what you want. You control through this. So it's really tough. So if you're going to get help from this, you have to be willing to listen to the feedback you get from professionals, from other people in your life. You have to be willing to ask people, how do you see me engaging in self-destructive behavior? How do you see me being defensive when you give me feedback? How do you see me being manipulative? How do you see me not coming up with solutions to problems? You have to be willing to hear the hard stuff from people who care about you, who aren't trying to hurt you with it, but are trying to help you see this in yourself. It's seeing things that other people can see in you. So it's hard. You're going to feel sad. You're going to feel anxious working through this. And eventually, though, you can overcome this thinking process. And a lot of it has to do with your thinking, because it starts with the negative thoughts. Everybody, nobody appreciates me. Even myself, my kids don't appreciate me. That's negative thinking. So you learn some skills to challenge your thinking. You can go online and look up thought challenging statements, or challenging my negative thinking, cognitive behavioral therapy worksheets. And I'll put some here in the show notes. But we have to be willing to question ourselves. Is that really true? Does nobody care about me? Well, apparently, I have people in my life who say they care about me. I have people calling to check on me. So it's not really true that nobody cares about me. Is it true that nobody appreciates what I do for them? Is it true that no matter what I try, nothing works? We have to start with those thoughts, and we have to say, well, there was that one time. Oh, that one time, that's a time. We have to start with looking at our stinking thinking, because it's not going to get you anywhere but more stinking thinking. So there are some things to do, but you got to engage in some self-reflection, because without some self-awareness and willingness to hear the feedback from other people, then you're not going to make much progress, because unhelpful thinking, and the articles that I will attach, I would read these because this information is coming from those articles. It says, self-reflection and being willing to have self-awareness and identify unhelpful thinking patterns, which are at the root of the victim complex. So it's really a thinking problem, and we have to be willing to change our thinking in order to change our attitudes and our behaviors, because our feelings follow our thinking, and so do our behaviors. So instead of looking at all my weaknesses and how everybody's picking on you, look at what are my strengths. So maybe, that's a negative attitude. Well, I also am creative. So maybe I can come up with a creative solution to this problem. So if you've got these weaknesses, you also have these strengths. So how can you take your strengths? I think it's the pollen. So come up with a list of your weaknesses. You might want to do that with your therapist or somebody you trust a lot who's not going to berate you for them. For me, it would be my tone of voice, my quickness to anger, my high expectations of other people. I can go on and on. But I also am creative. I am also compassionate. I am also a hard worker. I am also disciplined. So, how can I take these problems and take one of my strengths and come up with solutions that may be helpful? You can't do this on your own. You can do some of it, but you're going to need a coach, a therapist, somebody to help you work through this. So you want to work from a strength-based approach instead of saying, "Well, I just can't," and I was, it's whiny, it's victimy. Challenge your negative thoughts. And if you're working with a therapist, or if you ask your friends, "Can you help me recognize when I am being negative about something, or if I come back with a defensive comment, or I come back with a snarky attitude? Can you help point that out to me? Because I'm not sure I know when I'm doing that." So then have them help you. Well, how can I challenge this negative thought? Or how can I take more responsibility for my part in this situation instead of just blaming my kid or my spouse or the boss? How can I look at what was my part, and then what can I do about it? Another way to overcome the victim mentality is to set realistic goals, because a lot of times victim mentality is caught up in perfectionism. It's all or nothing, which a lot of us are familiar with and have engaged in. But if we set a realistic goal, no, I can't go do a 10K, but maybe I could walk for 10 minutes. And that's a doable goal. And then I can start to build that self efficacy, that self agency, that belief that I can accomplish some of this. It's a long, long process, because you're going to take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back sometimes. Like, I don't even know why I bother, because here I am again. Well, how many times are you going to keep getting up? As many as it takes, I hope. Again, focusing on the solution instead of the problem. Don't come to me with a problem, spouse, child, friend, unless you come to me with some solutions. Then I'll help you work through it. And work on a growth mindset. In other words, when I have a setback, because you will, like I told you, I still have setbacks when it comes to falling into the victim mentality with, "My kids don't care about me, well, because I know they do, but sometimes my thinking gets the better of me, and I fall into wah. And then I have to go, "Stop it. It's not true. Quit the faulty thinking. If you want to spend time with your kids, then you take responsibility and invite them over for lunch or go out for dinner." So, a growth mindset. See your setbacks when you fall back into your negative patterns or your negative behaviors as part of the normal human experience, and get back up. And a lot of this has to do with all the things related to weight loss, too. When you have a setback, don't quit. I'll start again next Monday. Start again that afternoon. Same kind of thing. There's a lot of overlap between our failure to follow through with healthy behaviors, whether it's to keep weight off, whether it's to stay sober, whether it's to quit spending too much money, whether it's to quit spending too much time on social media, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of setback, and we have to get back up and keep moving on, and not look at that as a failure, but to say, okay, that didn't work for me. What can I try? And to document your successes so that you can recognize, I have had success. And then learn new coping skills. Ding, 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 ding. Number one, if you ask me, this doesn't work for me. Being a whiner, being a victim, being a complainer, being a negative Nelly, being a nothing works for me, being the one who does everything, but then resenting people who don't do for me, it's not getting you anywhere. So, what can I do to get those needs met? Valid needs. We all need to be appreciated. We all need to be a part of. We all need to feel like we have something to contribute. We all need to have a purpose. So, what coping skills can we learn through therapy, through videos, through podcasts, through friends, through 12-step meetings, through whatever it happens to be, and try new ways to cope? I don't have to eat. If I identify the feeling, I'm lonely. How can I get this need for loneliness met in a healthy way rather than turning to food? I'm angry. What can I do with the energy buildup rather than yell at my kids or my husband or my dog, and learn a healthy coping skill for dealing with this anger? And then I'm not hurting other people or destroying my relationship. Or I have this big emotion, and my tendency is to run out and eat. And the big emotion is fear of rejection. I'm going to give a presentation, and I'm afraid they're all going to reject me and say it's not a good idea. So rather than running in and getting that food that's going to make me feel temporarily better and then falling into the abyss of shame and agony, how can I get these fears met? Go to a supervisor, go to a colleague, talk it over, present your information to somebody who works with you, get information, get feedback, focus on gratitude as opposed to what's wrong in your world. Learn to set the healthy boundaries and have some self-compassion. This is a difficult topic, and I see it in my practice all too often, and I recognize it easily because I have been there, and there are times when I am there still today. I don't live there like I once did in the past, but I had to be very, very willing to say, yeah, you do this, Connie. Yeah, you do behave that way. Yes, you do engage in this. Yes, you do deny your engagement in that. Yes, you do minimize your part in situations. Yes, you do blame other people. Yes, you do get defensive. It's hard to take because we're already feeling badly about ourselves, right? But we have to learn to take it and go, I don't want to be that person. That is not who I want to be. So if I don't want to be that person, what can I learn to do instead? It's a learning process, and it can take years and years and years and years. That's okay, because I'd rather be years along the road and having made progress, even though I'm never going to reach perfection, than stay in that miserable place that I was in. So here's the take-home messages. Look in the mirror. Look in that mirror. Be honest about the ways you play the victim. And if you're really brave, ask other people. Ask other people about ways you play the victim. Use that list that I shared with you at the beginning. Hey, would you mind? I trust you, and I know you're going to tell me out of love. Do you see that I blame other people very frequently? Do you see me as seeking sympathy from other people? Do you think I'm kind of negative, or do I come in with solutions to my problems? Do you see me engaging in any self-destructive behavior? Do you hear me talking negatively about myself? Gather the data, get the information, be willing to hear it from people who love you and really want to help you. And then Decide what story you want to tell about yourself. Do you want to be 12 years from now going, I just do so much for all my life. I've just done so much for other people, and nobody ever does for me what I do for them. Why am I always the one giving? Do you still want to be singing that song? Is that the story you want to tell? Or do you want to be, and I do this, I've done this. Thank God I have learned to deal with myself better, to recognize my faults, to work on my faults, to continue to ask for feedback, to learn healthier communication skills, because I never want to be the person I was 35 years ago. I don't want to be that person. So I may engage in some of those behaviors now and then, but I'll tell you what, I got people in my life who are going to point it out to me. And then I have to decide, what do I want to do about that? But do you want the story you're singing, if you're deep into this wallowing self-pity and victim mentality, to be the same song you're singing 12 years from now? God, I hope not. I hope not. It's not a good place to live, and you're going to have pushed a lot of people away. Get help, get happier. Start seeking out the tools, seek out therapy, start a journal, use the suggestions that are in these articles I'm going to be posting. Start looking at your strengths, start looking at small goals, start giving yourself credit for achieving things, start questioning your thinking, start changing that thinking, stop blaming people. Ask, what is my part in this? Whew. All right. So next week, we're going to talk about 2 really huge skills that can help you if you struggle with self-sabotage, if you've fallen into the victim mentality, if you're struggling to develop the sense of, I can do this and I have value and the whole world's not picking on me and I have a part in this unhealthy thinking. We're going to talk about resiliency, meaning bouncing back from things, not just shoving them in the closet and ignoring them, but really working through and coming out the other end on a healthy way. And we're going to talk about self-efficacy. And interwoven with that, of course, will be how to think positively. All right, this may have been a painful session for you, but again, let me say, we've all engaged in some of this. Some people fall further into it, but if you know somebody like that, it's a very big sign that they are hurting and that they do need help. So offer them help, but realize we cannot do for somebody what they need to do for themselves, just like nobody can do for me what I need to do for myself. And it is ultimately my choice. All right. I hope that you will take away positive message from this, because this can be overcome. It can definitely be overcome. And by overcoming a lot of this, a lot of the other things in our lives that need tweaking, like emotional eating, spending too much time on our cell phones, too much time engaged in self in an unhealthy way, too much time focusing on how others are wronging us, it'll disappear, because we're learning to get our own needs met. Because all of this, there's a need underlying all of this, we will learn to get met in healthier ways. So next week, we'll look at, how do I fill my needs? How do I develop self-efficacy? And how do I develop some resiliency? So get ready. We're going to learn some positive coping skills next week and talk over this with somebody you love or you trust, or maybe make that therapy appointment, because this is no way to live. It's not healthy, and it's going to continue to put you in setback mode. That's not where we're headed, because this is your health. It's your responsibility this day and every day. So do what you got to do to get better. All right. See you next time. Bye.